back. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is episode number 134, and it's being recorded on Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024 at 5:40 p.m. And right as I'm recording this, the sun is just about going down. I have the shade closed right now, and I'm not going to get up and open it, but there's a portion of it at the bottom that's open, so I can see outside a little bit, and it definitely is, the sun is going down, but what a lovely day it was today. The temperature was beautiful. It was a perfect kind of weather to have the windows down in the car, the light shining through the trees, the leaves being lit up. It was just a beautiful sight to behold when you're driving right into that ray of sun. Oh my gosh, man, there's truly nothing like it. It's just a wonderful, wonderful time listening to your music or your podcasts, audiobooks, or the radio, or perhaps listening to nothing at all, just kind of being present in the moment. We take driving so for granted, especially, if you're living in a city, it's one thing where you have the ability to either walk everywhere, or maybe you could take a bus or a train or something along those lines. But getting to drive on an open road, we're always focused on getting to our destination and not the journey, so to speak. And sometimes it can definitely be like you had a long day of work and you're trying to get home, or you're trying to get somewhere. And that definitely happens. But being aware in the moment of just driving in your car, or driving with somebody in the car, perhaps you're the passenger or you're in the back seat, and you just kind of are totally aware in that moment that it's an open road. You can go anywhere you want, as long as you have enough gas and the money to pay for it. It's just you can go wherever you want, man. I guess you can't go to Europe. You probably you have to. If you're living in America, you're trying to go to Europe, but you got to get on a boat, man. But I'm sure, think about those boats you put your cars on. So who knows, man? Anywhere. The point is, though, is that there is no limit. You just go anywhere you want, do anything you want. It's your life to live, man, and it's your life to kind of do with it as you will. Let's give a shout out to David Scott. Good guy, David Scott. Give him a brief shout out on the slashers, non-franchise slashers episode. A couple hours in, I don't remember where, but he's a good guy. Talked to him a handful of times. He's a good, smart guy, very kind guy. His consistency and his persistence are truly an inspiration to us all. We can learn so much from him. Just a wonderful person to talk to, and somebody who truly enhances your life. So we raise our glasses. I got my glass right here, and I'll raise my mug as well. You can't see it, but I just lifted it. So we're going to raise it to David Scott right here. Thank you, David, for all that you do and for inspiring us all. It's very cool, man. That's some good coffee right there. Man, every time I go to record this, my throat is drier than the desert. And when I'm not recording, it's not, no matter how much I'm talking. Funny how that works, But either way. Man, let's talk about Roman Polanski, all right? It's coincidentally happened to just him being in the conscious as of late. Let's see here, because I recently watched his... Oh, there I am dropping things. Maybe I can edit that out. Yeah, I definitely see a spike in audio, so there's that. I recently watched his 2010 film, The Ghostwriter, with Ewan McGregor, Pierce Brosnan, and Kim Cattrall, Olivia Williams. It's a solid cast. It's a good film. It's a good thrill. I remember when it came out, it got a lot of attention. It was people were talking about it as one of the year's best, and it's a solid thriller, solid crime, political thriller. Ewan McGregor is hired to take over and ghostwrite these memoirs for a Pierce Brosnan's character, who is I forgot what he was. He was a prime minister, and sort of the problems that he gets into. There's a whole conspiracy going on, and I don't want to give too much of it away. It's not one of my favorite Polanski films. It's a solid thriller, but it's not one that particularly stands out in his filmography. But it's a very good film as well. I think that's the newest of it. Oh, you know what? No, I did. The newest of his films I had seen was Carnage from 2011, which I like quite a bit more. I believe is based off a play as well, and it feels very much like a play. That as well has Jodie Foster, Kate Winslet, Christoph Waltz, and John C. Reilly. It's a great back and forth between these two married couples, and also it is based off a play, Le Deux du Carnage, written by Reza. It's a great kind of four-person sort of film. You have these two parents, these two, this married couple. They're going to meet each other because I think one of their kids got in a fight at school or something like that, and ultimately devolves into a lot of bickering, a lot of fighting. But it's a very well done film. I haven't seen it since 2011, so my memory is not the strongest on it. I remember it being a very well done film, but Polanski kind of came into frame because I'm thinking I got my Vinegar Syndrome package in the mail the other day, and I was thrilled because I received the new 4K of The Tenant, one of my favorite Polanski films. Just a brilliant film from 1976. It's a thriller, but it's also a very funny film as well, and not in the way that you would particularly expect. Because the first time I watched it, a lot of the jokes, or a lot of the more comedic moments, didn't immediately register with me, but in rewatching, there are just some parts that are just so funny. And I think that Polanski is often, I guess, perhaps known for perhaps some of his more serious work, like Rosemary's Baby or Repulsion, The Pianist, all great films. But, you think back to just some of the moments in this, and then, of course, you have moments in the Fearless Vampire Killers, which really isn't his film. I mean, it is his film, but not in the way that he intended it to be. The final cut is not exactly his, and it doesn't feel like. I mean, it has some of the absurd moments from maybe Polanski's kind of comedy, but the film itself doesn't completely work. It's an interesting film in context of Polanski's career at the time. Sharon Tate, his future wife, would be one of the co-stars in the film, and this was 1967, so then he follows this up with, of course, Rosemary's Baby, 1968, and is a huge success. Took over directing from William Castle, who I don't know if he was ever actually signed on to be the director of it. I think he just owned the rights to it and made a deal to give it over to Polanski. But William Castle even has a little cameo in the film at one point. A very memorable one when Mia Farrow is in a phone booth and he knocks outside. It's a wonderful kind of cameo. But the reason I say is that I watched a fascinating documentary because as much as Polanski is as known for his films, his very personal life is also as well known. But I'm talking about I watched this fascinating documentary from 2008. It's called Wanted and Desired, Roman Polanski, or Roman Polanski Wanted and Desired, 2008. And it's a solid documentary. I think if you're unfamiliar with the personal life of Roman Polanski, I think this is a good film, good documentary to watch. If you are like me and basically knew everything in this, I think the reason to watch this would be for the clips and for the interviews. Because it's kind of like what I was talking about with that Godard cinema a little while ago, is that, everything in that documentary I basically already knew. It's basically an introductory kind of look. I mean, there's a lot of specifics in that you just can't get to in an hour and a half. And much like this as well, because this was done in 2008, and then The Ghostwriter was a big film when that came out in 2010, because I think his biggest film between that and, I'd say in the 21st century, was unquestionably The Pianist. It was an Academy Award-winning film. It's a brilliant film. It's one of Polanski's very best. I would say top, I don't want to give tops or anything, top 5, top 10, but I'd definitely say if it was like only a couple Polanski films to recommend someone in terms of quality and range, The Pianist is definitely up there. As being one of his very best. The documentary itself is very fascinating because it looks at the interesting and complicated life of Polanski, who lost his parents very tragically at a young age in the concentration camps. Has a very, I don't want to just give it all away, but I think a lot of this is probably pretty well known, but I'll leave some of the specifics out. But his wife is very brutally and publicly murdered, where it's on display for the world to see in a very tragic way. And then, of course, his sexual assault lawsuit, which would I don't want to give away the verdict of that or what happened in the case, because that basically becomes the climax of the documentary. But it's very fascinating to see more of the complexities of the trial itself, less about the complexities with Polanski and the woman in question, who, interestingly enough, I guess I will intentionally not name here, because in the documentary she even says that she having her name kind of dragged through the mud in this really had an effect on her. So I mean, you can look it up, do what you want, but I'll for the sake of just the context of this documentary, I'll not say the name. But sort of the trouble, the trial was very troubled to begin with. There were complications. The judge plays a whole like role in the film of just, it was clear that there was not going to be a fair trial going on. It was all just a big show and possible lies and possible. It's just very fascinating. I think, like I said, if you already know the story, if you already know Polanski, because it doesn't really get into. It jumps from the end of the trial into the 2000s, where he obviously still went on making films, but his post Rosemary's Baby stuff, pre Pianist, is very fascinating. Actually, I would say not post Rosemary's Baby. I'm sorry, probably post Tenant, because of course it talks about Chinatown, and one film it doesn't mention is What, from 1972. It's actually, funnily enough, I just bought that on Blu-ray from Severin a little bit ago. I've not seen that film. But Chinatown was a huge success. It was just a big deal. And then really his post-Tenant films they don't really mention, because he did Tess from 1979, which is really good. That's a very underappreciated film. Pirates from 1986, which I have not seen, but I hear is not very good. Oh my gosh, how embarrassing. Walter Matthau, I'm sorry, how embarrassing that was to forget that name. Walter Matthau, and I just had the list up right here, and now IMDb wants to trouble me. 1988, Frantic, with Harrison Ford. That's a solid film. It's a good kind of mirror of another film I talked about a little while ago, Dying Room Only, although I think the conclusion of this is a bit stronger than that film, but both those films I think are very good as well, both about missing sort of spouses, or missing partners, I should say. And anyways, I'll leave it at that. It's a solid film. The less you know about it, the better it is going in. Great cast as well in that, for sure. But yeah, it doesn't really touch on that. It just goes from the trial to winning the. I think he won Best Director for The Pianist. I don't. They mentioned it. They show it in the document. Yeah, it had to have been it, because they show the directors, and then yeah, he wins Best Director for The Pianist, and all right, you're probably going to hear a little bit of a pause right there. There was some noise coming that I couldn't stop, so I had to kind of wait for that to subside. But what was I talking about before? I was talking about Polanski and this documentary. That's right. So yeah, it jumps to him winning Best Director for The Pianist, and then this documentary. I think you could make a pretty long. You can even make like a mini series, honestly, if you wanted to, about, because Polanski has led such a interesting and fascinating life. He's always in the news for one reason or another. Has led a life of headlines and controversy, and just a excellent filmmaker. So there's a lot there, but I would recommend this documentary. I think it takes a pretty good look at the whole situation, because it jumps back and forth in time, talks about his up and coming days as a filmmaker, kind of making it big with Rosemary's Baby is on top of the world. He's got a new wife, and then sort of everything crashing down, and then kind of spiraling into a whole down period of his life. I'd also recommend a really solid video you can find on YouTube when he was on the Dick Cavett show. Not long after his the tragedy happened at his house, where and the documentary touches on sort of the unscrupulous sort of headlines and people making kind of crazy accusations about. I mean, because even I mean his whole relationship with Sharon, that's a whole other thing. I listened to a book. I should say I read, but I did listen to it, and I wish I'm gonna try to find the name of it right now. It was a wonderful book that was specifically about the life of Sharon Tate, and it talks about a very complicated relationship with Polanski. But of course, now I'm not going to be able to find it now that I am recording, so it will have to be brought back up another time. I'm trying to see if I can find it right here, so I'm not pausing it and spending 10 minutes trying to find it. No, I'm not going to be able to find it. Gosh. Nah. Oh, wait, is this it? Did I just find it? I think this might be it. This is fascinating podcasting, wouldn't you say? No, I don't think that's it. You know what? It's fine. If I find it, I'll come back to it. If not, that's okay. Um, maybe this is it. Uh, I think. I don't know. I think this might be it, but I'm not exactly sure. So I'm gonna not make it. I'm not gonna make an assumption. But, anyways, good stuff though. Good stuff. And that 4K of the Tenant looks. I mean, I haven't popped it in yet, but that release looks great. It's got a nice kind of window that you open up, and nice. Vinegar Syndrome always does great work with those releases, and especially a high profile release like that. It's just real cool, man. So that'll be watched at some point. I don't know whatever happened to that Chinatown 4K. That was like I don't think they printed enough, but I don't know if they ever reprinted that. Oh yeah, I actually had that pre-ordered, but then it never shipped because they didn't have any in stock, and then there was just never any more. But I don't know if that ever updated or not, or if they ever got more. Just wild, but yeah, good stuff, man. Good stuff, and let's talk about another filmmaker whom I like quite a bit. Last January, that's not true. Last year, January of 2023, I talked about one of my favorite discoveries, and that was the film Something Anything. And I mentioned filmmaker Paul Harrill, who has only done a couple of films. He has a handful of short films made, but he now it's weird because I'm going to go back to this interview that I read, but it's the interview says that this film I'm going to talk about was his second. Oh, you know what? Then they are correct. Okay, there was another film that was listed, but I guess it was an anthology or something. It says he did a segment in that. So this is his sophomore film. But anyways, I talked about his debut, Something Anything, from 2014. One of the most romantic and genuinely touching films I've ever seen. It's one of my favorite discoveries, and it's a film that it really just had a big impact on me. And so I watched this follow-up film recently from 2019, Light from Light, which is a different kind of film, but also echoes a lot of the same kind of moods that Something Anything has. This film stars Marin Ireland and Jim Gaffigan. Marin Ireland, who I saw her in this film, and I was like, oh, that's right. She is a wonderful actress. She was in a really good film from last year called Birth, Rebirth. That was a good film. That was like a solid. That's her, and she is. Well, I don't want to give too much away. I think even the trailer maybe gives a bit much away. It's a horror film, but it's a really good drama as well. It's a solidly made film, very dark but very good. And she gives I remember watching that film. I was like, man, I've not seen this woman before. She is phenomenal in this film. She was like one of my favorite. One of like most stand-up performances I saw of the year. It's just so like laid back and subtle, and she just like looks annoyed and angry at everybody. She's just so well done, and Paul Harrill does a great job of capturing a different kind of performance here with her. She plays this character, Sheila, who is a ghost investigator, but it's very low key. It's not quite like perhaps you'd see on like a show like Ghost Adventures or Ghost Hunters. The film has a very subtle, subdued kind of feeling to it, where it really, there's not a lot of score. It's very quiet, but she is asked by this character Richard, played by Jim Gaffigan, who's he's a comedian. Well, in real life, he's a comedian. He's a very well known actor. He's been in a whole bunch of stuff, and I've actually seen him in a couple like these really smaller kind of films, which is very cool. There was another film I watched that I thought was actually good. That was like it was pretty good. I wonder if I can find the name of it right here. Sorry, I was having a sip right there. Gosh, I'm not gonna be able to find it right now. But it was a good film. It was he plays his father, and the kid is like I don't want to give too much away, but because I was very easy going to give it away. I think I watched it for the 2018 episode, but it's not here. Maybe 2021. Can't find it. Doesn't matter. Anyways, but she is going to investigate to see if he's Richard, his wife, has passed. He's a very kind of quiet life. He's still very shooken up about the whole thing. He's very like soft spoken, very low key, and the way that these two kind of bounce off each other. And when I say bounce, it's not as if there's a big kind of. I mean, there is a general conclusion to this film, but what I like about what Paul Harrill does so well is that the way that he captures just characters just casually talking to each other, it is so endearing and it is so touching the way that these characters are able to kind of just get into each other's lives. There's no big melodrama. Like even early in the film, she's having a little bit of trouble with her son. He's not really paying too much attention, or is doing his own thing, but he also has his own kind of thing going on, and it moves along at such a casual yet brisk pace where it never slogs, it's never boring. It's just this steady mood that is so specific to this film in a way specific to the way that Paul Harrill directs, that I really can't fully put into words. It's incredibly inspirational for my own writing. Between this film and Something Anything, I'm like, man, this is a film I would love to write, to direct, and I find him to be such a wonderful, low-key filmmaker. And I want to reference this interview that I looked up, or actually that happened to come up, because I was just reading him up, and I was like, man, he's made two films that have just really had a big impact on me. Like, I don't really know much about this guy, so I was looking him up, and there's a really solid interview when this was playing at some festivals. On it's from decentfilms.com, and the interview is called "Of Grief and Ghosts: Interview with Light from Light writer-director Paul Harrill," and it talks about just a lot of the kind of themes between both of these films, this underlying kind of religious or spiritual sort of aspect to them, in a way where it is so subtle and it is so nonchalant that when I was reading it up on it, it made me reflect on some of my own feelings with Something Anything, where I'm just like, it always registered, but I never, some of the feelings in that always registered, but it never quite came to surface, where it's been like present in my brain. But then when reading it, where it basically confirms kind of some of my ideas, I'm like, you know what, that's what it is. I don't want to just like read the whole thing, but there was one passage that I wanted to read, or one section that I wanted to read. Let's see. And okay, I want to read this the interviewee's or the interviewer's question and his response, which I think is really great. So this guy SDG, I'm sorry, I don't have his whole name up. It just says SDG. If I can find the name here. Yeah, I can't find it. So SDG here, he says, of course I just lost it now. Okay, bear with me for just a second. He says, filmmaker Jim Jarmusch described Patterson as an antidote to heavy action and drama, and way back in 2005, I think it was A.O. Scott who described Philip Groening's monastic documentary Integrate Silence as an antidote to the rest of the year's films. Do you think there is something in mainstream movie making that calls for some kind of therapeutic response? To which Harrill replies, I do think that increasingly we live in a world where personal reflection, the sort of embracing an interior life that we all have, or the potential to have, is something we don't deal with, or maybe even have less access to because of all the distractions and cacophony. And that's all the more reason why we need to seek that out, because the interior life, the spiritual life, it's not just essential to our well-being, it's essential to our being. Movies can be a part of the cacophony, or they can be part of the search for meaning and a reflective life. And however pretentious it may be to say so, I would like my films to be part of that and not part of the cacophony. And this is what I'm saying when I talk about, there's always been the the big mainstream theatrical, big budget films. But I think that it's not just a Hollywood product. It's really what a filmmaker kind of puts into it. So that's why, to me, like I remember like when Oppenheimer came out, and that was a big Hollywood film. It was playing 70 millimeter IMAX. I talked about it a bunch on the show, but to me, that was like such a sign of something that is so lost now. We have these big films, but it's a film made for adults, and that's why I wasn't surprised that each time I saw it. And the first time it didn't happen. I saw it two more times in theaters, and both times multiple people walked out at some point. And I've never had that happen before, where I see the same film and multiple people walked out. And I do think that there is a certain level of viewing that is lost now, because not just of giant theatrical mainstream Hollywood, movies. That there's nothing inherently wrong with those, but I think when I read this and I see a film like this that is reaching for something far more mature and far more touching and special than just a giant noise fest. Because Oppenheimer, a film like that, you could, you market it as this is a film about the atom bomb, about the creation, but then you watch it and it's far more of a quiet kind of, quiet minus the kind of bombastic score that would often pop in, but some of the character moments in that, I guess maybe quiet, not literally, because it is a pretty loud film at times, but quiet in that these character moral conundrums that is not just this is good or this is bad. Now, perhaps that is because it is a true story and people are far more complex than that. But when I see a film like that, to me, that was a sign of like hope in theatrical mainstream films. And when I see a film like this, and I see filmmakers like Paul Harrill who are trying to reach for something more mature and something far more stimulating, a film like this or anything, where you just have these really interesting, complex characters with these just really kind of tender real life moments where there isn't a big conclusion. Now, with that said, now the conclusion in this film, it's incredibly moving and incredibly touching. And it's just when I see a film like this, and I see a film like Something Anything, it continues why I've devoted my life to film, because I come across films like this and I'm so moved by it in a way that, and I have no problem with, I shouldn't even mention it in the conversation, because I'm not putting down, mainstream $200 million films. I think there was plenty of quality stuff there that are fun movies, but I'm not quite as attracted to those, because as fun as they may be to watch, it's like fast food. It's like you forget about it, and then it goes in. It's not, and then it comes out, and that's fine. I like fast food. That's fine too, but I'm not gonna have it every single day. It's just films that really kind of move you and mean something. And when I say films for adults, I don't mean just an R-rated film where you have characters constantly swearing. I'm talking about more so just really, really good characters, really good writing, even if there's not a lot of dialogue in it. Just these little moments. I remember even a film I've seen this year, it just really kind of stuck with me. Actually, there's quite a few, but I think of the film that really kind of came and went was the film Mountains, which, I'm not going to do like a top favorite list, but when I'm looking at my favorite films of the year that really kind of had an impact on me, that was one that I'm like, man, no one is talking about this. And that was a film that I found so so incredibly endearing and touching that I'm just not interested in the loud kind of noise fests that get released. But they all, they all have their place, and that's fine. And actually, as I'm saying this, I am running out of time, so I guess I should probably wrap this up here. But anyways, that's all I'm gonna really say on that front. All right, thank you guys for listening. I appreciate it. I'm running out of time here. Enjoy. It's a beautiful time of the year. Just take it all in, man. It's great. All right, thank you.